Okay, so this presentation will concentrate upon the symbolism of the skull and the different belief systems of nomadic tribes related to decapitation. The starting point of my presentation is an elder-rich moment of Polish history, the decapitation of Duke Henry during the Battle of Legnica. Did this slide change or?
I want to go to screen share for the, I mean, it's not for the slideshow, for the, please do the slideshow function on the PowerPoint.
Okay, I'm sorry, just.
Yeah.
I pushed F5, but it seems that it didn't.
Now it's good. Now
okay,
it's good.
Thank you. Great. In 1241, the Mongol armies arrived in the territory of Latin Christianity. So the principal target of the Mongol army was Hungary. The different Polish duchies were in good relationship with the Hungarian king, and thus they could provide him assistance. The campaign started in February in Poland when the Mongols attacked Sandomir. The Mongols pushed forward to Lower Silesia, where they faced with the army of Henry the Pious, the Duke of Lower Silesia, on 9th of April. Henry was helped by Duke Mieszko of Oppel, the Bohemian Margrave, Boleslas, and the force of Templars. Henry, unable to wait for further assistance, thus confronted the Mongol army and lost the battle and his life. The Annales Sancti Pantaleonis Coloniensis Maximi describes Henry's head being removed and carried away by his captors. The 15th century Polish historian Jan Długosz left a detailed description in his chronicle about the death of the Duke. Henry was surrounded by Mongols and was unable to break through and escape. Długosz said that the Tartars pounced on a prince and dragging him to Balista Clear, away from the area of the fighting, cut off his head with a sword, tore off all his heraldic insignia, and left his corpse naked. After the Mongols won the battle, as Długosz recounted, they put the head of Henry on a lance and displayed it to the citizens of Legnica, calling upon to open the gates. The Polish burghers refused to let the Mongols in, and the Mongol army soon left Poland to join to the forces of Batu. Then the Poles searched for Henry's body for days, but it was difficult to recognize it without the head. Finally, Henry's wife Anne helped them to identify the Duke's corpse by telling them that the Duke had 6 toes on his foot. After the body was found, it was buried at Wrocław. This part of the chronicle was later proved because Henry's corpse was exhumed in 1832 and positively identified by his 6 toes and the missing head. C. de Bridia, the author of Historia Tartarorum, mentioned another very blood-curdling yet intriguing scene which happened during the Battle of Legnica, and corroborates the annals of Długosz's description. He wrote that then the Tartars took Duke Henry prisoner, stripped him completely, and made him kneel before the body of their dead general, who had been killed at Sandomir. Then they took his head as if it had been the head of a sheep, through Moravia into Hungary to Batu, then threw it among the other heads of the slain. 2 tiny elements pertaining to Henry's death, that is the being forced to kneel and the transportation of his head to Hungary, have not been recorded in any such detail elsewhere, but they fit well into the same story. However, we do not know how the general, who the general was who died at Sandomir, but most probably he was a minor general because the most important figures survived the Western campaign. C. de Bridia has a mysterious identity. He may have been one of the lesser-known companions of John of Plano Carpini, or he was never been a member of the company, but he supplemented Carpini's description with extra information in Poland. He left a lengthy account about the Mongols to the posterity. His writing, the Historia Tartarorum, or in English, is frequently called the Tartar Relation, differs from Plano Carpini's report in objectivity, aim, and scope. C. de Bridia most probably was of Polish origin, and thus he reported Central European events of the Mongol invasion in more detail than Carpini. His account preserved information about the Battle of Muhi and Legnica, which cannot be found in other sources. The abundance of his information connecting to Central Europe must have been related to his Polish origin. My presentation will concentrate to the following questions. Why did the Mongols decapitate the Duke and bring his head to Hungary? Why did the Mongols feel it was important to make Duke Henry kneel before the dead general? To answer this question, I will use the methodology of comparative religious studies. The events described by Dorottya, that is the decapitation and the transportation of the head, is not without parallel. The valuable 13th century source, The Secret History of Mongols, contains two similar situations, but from a different perspective. Before analyzing them, I have to add that I look at two forms of decapitation: beheading of the enemies as a punishment and decapitation of their fellows due to religious reasons. But these two aspects are connecting according to my point of view. Before Genghis Khan united the peoples of Inner Asia, he had to defeat different Mongolian and Turkic tribes, including the Merkids and Naimans. When Genghis defeated the Merkids, their leader, I quote, Tokta was struck there and then by a random arrow and fell. His sons could not bury him, nor could they take his body away, so they severed his head and took that away with them. A similar episode happened when the leader of Naimans, the leader of Naimans, Ong Khan. Görbeszű, the mother of Tayan Khan of the Naimans, said, Ong Khan was the great old Khan of former days. Bring his head here, and if it really is, we shall sacrifice to it. She sent a messenger to Korisubeci and had him cut off and bring back his head. She recognized it and placed it on a large white felt rag. She had her daughters-in-law perform the rites pertaining to a daughter-in-law, ordered that the ceremonial wine be drunk and the horse fiddle be played, and, holding the cup, made an offering to the head. The head, being then so honored, laughed. It laughed, said Tayan Khan, and he stamped on it and crushed it to pieces. Thereupon Kökesű Szarvak said, you have cut off the head, Khan's head, and brought it here. The next thing you do is to crush it to pieces. This is not right. The sound of our dogs barking has turned nasty. This phenomenon, that is reverence or taking the head instead of the whole body, was also very likely described by Plano Carpini, who saw in Mongolia the cemetery of those soldiers who died in Hungary. I quote, in the Tartar country, there are two cemeteries, one in which emperors, princes, and all the nobles are buried, and no matter where they die, if possible, they are brought there. There is, in fact, a great deal of gold and silver buried with them. The other cemetery is the one in which the men who were killed in Hungary and buried, for many were killed there. No one dares approach this cemetery except the guards who are posted there to watch. In this description, he did not mention that they only brought the heads, since it was impossible to carry the whole body over 7,000 kilometers, but it's likely enough that the Mongols brought only the heads or part of the head of the dead man to home. We can determine this from a Chinese source from the same time, written by two Song dynasty diplomats, the Haida Shilue, which confirms that the Mongols warrior died in a campaign, his slave, or even another high-ranked person would be highly rewarded by transporting the head specifically of the dead Mongol back to their homeland. However, here the old Chinese text either can hint to the whole body, so it's debated whether the old Chinese text refer only the head or the body. These customs surrounding the head cannot be solely be found among the Mongols, but in different Finno-Ugrian tribes, such as early Hungarians. Different stories remained in Western sources about this costume. The history of the Bishop of Cambrai recounts that in 954, Bulcsú, the Harka of the Hungarians, besieged Cambrai. The Harka was the third most important rank among the Hungarians. The siege was unsuccessful, and thus the attackers had to leave the town. When they withdrew from the walls, some of the defenders went out and attacked a small group of Hungarians and killed them. One of them was Bulcsú's male relative, probably his nephew. Then the Hungarians wanted to give all the taken plunder back to Cambrai in exchange to the head of Bulcsú's male relative, but the burghers saw trapped, so they did not give back the head. Bulcsú had already been baptized by that time, but clearly he still clung to this pagan custom surrounding the head. By understanding the importance of the dead warrior's head among nomads, we can infer the meaning of Duke Henry's decapitation and taking away his head. Ivan Paulson, István Dienes, and István Fodor demonstrated with the help of written archaeological and folkloristic sources that the Hungarian, Mongolian, and North Eurasian peoples believed in dual souls or even more souls than that in some cases. According to their belief system, there are two souls, one of them being attached to the body. This soul is usually called body soul or breath soul or life soul, the carrier of the mind and emotions and connected to breathing. The Hungarian word for soul, lélek, derived from the word of breathing. The exact meaning of the word lélek is debated. It either originally meant only this soul, or this is a plural word since in Hungarian, he suffix is the trace of plural. The other soul is named as the free soul or the shadow soul. This soul was able to leave the body. The shadow soul could be experienced through dreams or different illnesses which caused by the loss of this soul. This soul was able to wander about as a vagabond while the body remained on its place, and the home of this second soul is in the skull. During the death of a human, the life soul died, but the free soul remained as an incorporeal being. This free soul is, as a shadow of the once living human, a ghost still connected to the dead body and could appear to his or her relatives. The shadow soul, after surviving the death of the owner, without the proper funeral of the deceased, could have become an evil-doing ghost. Thus, the remaining members of the community were always eager to provide a proper, traditional funeral to the dead members. Moreover, the head itself could represent the whole human and his or her corporeal and emotional life in different shamanistic traditions. For example, there are several Siberian Nganasan myths which describe the importance of the head of the dead people. There is a certain story in which the protagonist took his whole afterlife journey as his head rolled on the ground while he left behind his other body parts. During campaigns, when such traditional funerals were not possible, most probably only the heads were brought back home. In the cases when they were unable to even bring the heads back to the homeland, they usually buried the bodies. This might answer the question of why it is hard to find burial sites of those Mongols who died during the Western campaign or Hungarians who died during the pre-Christian Western invasions. Since these customs are deeply rooted in the shamanistic traditions, it's possible that the Mongols humiliated and decapitated Duke Henry because by doing this, they not only defeat their enemy corporally, but also divested him from the possibility of any kind of proper funeral, so his soul would not rest in peace. According to their belief system, one's real death does not occur at the time when the breeze goes away, but when the shadow soul dies in turn. This treatment of enemies was not a unique phenomenon. Even Bredia's text mentions that Henry's head were thrown among other heads, which means that some other Christians suffered the same fate. The secret history of Mongols mentions that crushing Onkan's head was not a proper thing to do, and this ominous event preceded the catastrophic defeat of the Naimans. Moreover, near to the Hungarian village, St. László a mass grave was found, most probably from the age of the first Mongol invasion. The corpses were thrown into a grave, but the heads were buried separately. Ibn Fadlan, the 10th century traveler, also described the costume by mentioning that the Bashkirs carried off the heads of their defeated enemies while their corpses were left behind. One jar of the famous treasure found at Nagy Szent Miklós also depicts this kind of scene. The second jar represents a victorious leader arriving back from a battle. The leader is carrying his defeated enemy on his saddle. Most probably, the treasure belonged to a 9th century Avar chieftain. A more direful story was described in a Slavic chronicle about the death of Sviatoslav, the Grand Prince of Kiev, who was defeated by Kuria, a Pechenek Khan, in 972. He made the school of Sviatoslav into a chalice. The Bulgar Khan Krum likewise was reported to have made a school of a defeated Byzantine emperor into his drinking cup. To conclude my paper, the description of the annals of the monastery of St. Pantaleonis, the Chronicle of Lugos, and the report of Sidebridia about the death of Duke Henry the Pious complement each other. Most probably the Mongols captured the Duke and humiliated him by stripping him of his clothes and maybe forcing him to kneel to their dead general. Then they beheaded him. They showed the head to the townspeople at the walls, but when they departed to Hungary to join to Batu's army, they brought the head with them. It's well known that the Mongols chased the leaders of their enemies. They did it with Aladdin Muhammad II, the Shah of the Khwarezmian Empire, and with the Hungarian king Béla IV. My presentation showed how they treated the leaders of their captured enemies. They did not just kill them corporally, but they destroyed even their cells according to their belief system. And thank you for your attention.